Let me see if current is coming.
I think we are now live. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to today's session. I am Ishan Sharma. And before starting the session, I would like to just take a moment to uh, dedicate today's lecture to a man who had a very big role in shaping Karwan and in shaping me as an adult, as a citizen. My father, Mr. Rajesh Sharma, whom I lost on the 1st of May 2021 to coronavirus. And he was a very nice, fun loving man who was very passionate about life. He was in IIT Kanpur, working in IIT Kanpur when he left his job to pursue his passion, that was business in Delhi. And he was in Delhi when he got infected with the coronavirus in April, and we were in Kanpur, unfortunately. So I am dedicating this lecture to my father and to all our loved ones whom we have lost, who had no reason to go like this due to this coronavirus and the mismanagement by the authorities, not just the central government, but different governments of different states. So may their soul rest in peace. And I have now recovered from the virus and I'm back. We are back with a set of great scholars and great historians. And in that, today we are honored to have Professor Rekha Pandey ma'am with us. Truly an honor to host her this evening. She is currently the director of SEED, Society for Empowerment Through Environment Development. She was the former director of the Center for Women's Studies and a professor of history in the University of Hyderabad. She is a well-known and well-published scholar in the interdisciplinary area of history and women's studies. She is an established academician in the field of international studies, women's history, and gender studies. As a feminist historian, she has been concerned with the theoretical and methodological problems of reconstructing women's history and in understanding the historical roots of women's subordination in the South Asian context. She also attempts to examine the varied historical context at the regional, local levels and explain the reproduction and subordination of women at the national and global scale in a variety of related, albeit different, contemporary contexts. She has been an academic activist also associated with the women's movement in India. Thank you so much, Professor Pandey, for accepting our invitation this evening. And she is going to talk about divine sounds from the heart, women and the Bhakti movement, 12th to 17th century. So, without further ado, I would formally welcome and invite Professor Pandey to deliver today's Karwan special lecture. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you very much, Ishan, for that beautiful introduction. First of all, I'm really very happy to be part of Karwan and talking to you all. And especially, when I came to know about this fact that you lost your father very recently, and it's really very sad that because of the current pandemic, we are losing so many people. And, my heart really melts, and you cannot imagine how I feel that you have come back so soon and you have started organizing this lecture. And really, it is a great thing that you have decided to dedicate this lecture to your father and all the other people who have passed away because of the corona. It's an unprecedented times. And so, my best wishes with all of you. And I'm sure, you will really, with all your commitment, all your dedication, you will take Karwan to great heights. And like you said, your father was the inspiration behind it. And I'm glad that you're keeping this torch alive. Now, as far as the topic, can you see my screen? Is it visible?
Yes, ma'am.
Uh,
Yes, ma'am.
as far as the topic is concerned, I'm going to speak on the Bhakti movement. And the title of this talk is Divine Sounds from the Heart. This is the title of my book. And primarily, what I am saying is based on this book, Divine Sounds from the Heart, which has been published by Cambridge Scholars publication in 2010. 2020, they brought out a paperback edition. And what I'm going to do in today's paper or talk is I'm going to first talk about why do we need women's history. Then I'm going to give a little background about the Bhakti movement. I'm going to look at men in the Bhakti movement. Then I will focus on the women and how they created an alternative voice. And finally, I'm going to conclude. So this is the framework of my talk today. Whenever we look at our history, history is only his story. It hardly tells us anything about her story because our perception of the past has primarily been from a very male point of view. Yes, we do have few Razias, Chand Bibi, Lakshmi Bai, but then, we are talking about these women because they are performing men-like roles. In few textbooks, you have a chapter on women. But by and large, what our history tells us, it presents men's history as universally human. The whole concepts, the priorities, all these reflect a very male interest, male concern, and experiences. So by and large, women have been ignored in history. Because there is an assumption that they did not play any important part. They were behind the scenes. And we continue to get a very partial picture of our past. It is nothing which tells us about her story. And it is only his story that we get. And I, like many other feminist historians who work in this area, we strongly believe that our understanding of the past will continue to be very biased because what we want is not his story or her story. We want our story. And women are also a very important part of this story. The general principle of a patriarchal society is that men work in the public domain and women are in the private. And it is the public domain which becomes very important. So therefore, women are only very passive participants in the historical process. History is only doing and talking about issues that occur outside. And therefore, women have no role in history. I take up the Bhakti movement as a very important movement because it can give you a different view of history, especially when we are talking of women's history. Gerda Lerner writes that, the experiences of women in history has been very obscured and neglected because of our patriarchal understanding. And this is something, it has significantly affected by the psychology of both men and women. Similarly, when you look at the whole Bhakti movement, we see that here is a movement where, both men and women become part of that movement, but women, use and exploit a religious emotion to, challenge patriarchy itself. And in the process, they create an alternative space for themselves. What these women were doing, they were challenging patriarchy, they were challenging the mortal man to whom they were tied in a relationship of marriage by, extending the definition of love to God. And what they did, they tried to imagine their relationship with this God, either as a lover, as a wife, a mistress, a friend, and servant. And they created an alternative world, because they had a lot of issues with the existing mortal husband, and this provides a very good space to them. If I give you a little background about this movement, all of us know that it emerged in the south and then it traveled into North India. Because by 7th century, what was happening, there was a great revival, religious revival, which was taking place in South India. And it had twofold intentions. One, it was trying to eradicate the influence of creeds of Buddhism and Jainism on one hand, and it was also trying to popularize a new mode of salvation against the monopoly of Brahmins. The Brahmins had monopolized most of the religious texts, religious philosophy, and salvation was in their hands. So this was something which was questioning all this. And the whole emphasis now shifted into devotion. The use of regional language became very important to spread the message of God. And what was said in this movement was that you just need to seek refuge in God, worship Him, and then you can gain a lot of relief. Now, this new concept of bhakti, it is not something that it only emerged in medieval times. It was there right from beginning. If you look at Bhagavad Gita, if you look at some of the Purans, the concept of bhakti is always there. But what they did was, in this period, this idea became much more closer to the masses, and they all rejected Sanskrit because they felt this language was only of the language of the elite. It could not connect to the common people. And you had a number of writings that came up in regional language. Kabir himself says that Sanskrit is like the water of the well. It is very still, but vernaculars are like flowing water. And so, you had a lot of creativity. There was an outpouring of devotion. Now, how do you explain the Bhakti movement emerging at this time? There was a lot of socio-economic political changes that were happening from 12th century onwards, because medieval society was a society where you could see a lot of these changes. Especially if you look at it, there was an agrarian expansion taking place, there was large scale specialization, and the whole political background. This is a period where you no longer have the strong centralized states like you had in the earlier period. Look at the Mauryan Empire, look at Harsha's empire. You had a number of regional kingdoms that emerged at this time. And therefore, you have to understand the socio-economic preconditions of the rise of the Bhakti movement located in these interrelated and widespread changes that were taking place in the production process. And this was something which affected the socio-cultural, political, and also the religious sphere at this time. The feudalism had become very intensified at this time because the coming of Turks saw the feudal oppression being intensified much more. And there was a very clear-cut mechanism which was in place now, to extract the surplus and pass it on to the ruling elite through the Ikta system. And the Turkish ruling class, where they were living in towns, but all the surplus that was being brought from the rural areas was channelized to them, and they had huge resources at their hands. And this, along with the spread of the feeling of regionalism, prepared the base for the Bhakti movement at this time. Politically, also, if you look at the period between 13th to 16th century, we find that the all-powerful state had declined. There were a number of regional and provincial states that had come into existence. If you read Tuzuk-e Babri, Babur himself talks about the number of feudal states that emerged. You have Bengal, Khandesh, Jaunpur, Malwa, Bihar, Kashmir, Sindh in the north. And in the south, you had the Bahmani Empire being divided into Golconda, Bijapur, Bidar, Gulbarga, Ahmednagar, and Barar. And this, coupled with, as Dr. R.S. Sharma has already shown, that right from prior to even 6th, 7th century, you had a number of land grants that were given to Brahmins. And they were using these for the maintenance of the temple. And this is something, you have, by this time, there is a growth of magnificent temples all over India. And there is a resurgence of Hinduism that takes place. And, the Brahmins get more and more wealth. They were enjoying many powers and privileges. They were appointed as Raj Purohits. And, they were the ones who played a major role in deciding matters of dharma and polity. The economic base was also very strong. because in this whole political turmoil, what we find is the Delhi Sultanate had released forces which led to the expansion of towns. And, there was an change in the agrarian conditions. And because of these expansion in town, there's an increase in craft production and commerce which takes place. Now, because of this, why is it that suddenly there is a lot of craft production which is taking place? Like Irfan Haviv and others have shown, there is a lot of improvement in technology which comes in at this time. Whether you look at it in sericulture, carpet weaving, vertical loom, introduction of spinning wheel, and cotton textile sector, the Persian wheel in agriculture, all these brought about a lot of change. There is an introduction of paper also, which becomes important. There's a very interesting incident that, in the court of Iltutmish, when a letter would come, they would read it, watch it, and keep it. But by the end of 14th century, even the sweet seller would wrap the sweets in a paper and hand it over to his customers. So you can see the increase in amount of paper that comes in at that time. And all this, there is an increase in technology, there is an increase in craft production, and there is a lot of wealth that is being generated. So as a result of all these, socio-economic changes that are taking place, you have new artisan and mercantilist groups that are emerging. The situation is almost the same like what Romila Thapar is talking about, the emergence of traders and this thing during when, Buddhism emerges in India. But again, these groups, though they had acquired a lot of wealth, they were not able to assimilate into the prevailing hierarchy, and there was no change in their status. Because what we find is that the city had, in this period, generated its own social stratification. And though the merchants and artisans had enjoyed a pride of place, they had no social status. Because again, it's an order which is dominated by the Brahmins. In this situation now, you have the temple also emerging and becoming very important. The temple almost acquired the power of, which was co-equal to that of a state. They were directing agricultural development through the endowments that they received. They also gave endowments. They had a lot of, people employed in the temple to maintain them. Most of the festivals that were being celebrated brought in a lot of revenue and wealth to these temples. And we find that, these grants had a lot of ownership rights. They gave a lot of privilege to these people. And it was the temple which became the nucleus around which the village and town life was developed. And we find that, they were administered in these ways. Their treasury became the bank. They were also receiving a lot of endowments. They were giving a lot of money with interest. And the temples were also becoming very important. Now, it was in this kind of a climate that the whole Bhakti movement emerged. Now, Bhakti as a concept, as I've mentioned, it arose in South India and it traveled to North India, because by 7th century, you see a great religious revival taking place in South India. And now, the whole emphasis shifts on regional language, devotion to an individual God. And it brought religion very close to the masses. The women also, because Bhakti concept said that both men and women can get salvation if you worship God. And it was something which was open. And it never said that you had to leave society, become part of, the dharma, or go out of society in order to practice Bhakti. You could continue to be a weaver, you could be a carpenter, you could be a blacksmith, and yet you could practice Bhakti. And the same thing, it also opened up the doors of women. Now, what we find is that women also participated in great numbers in this movement, almost like a mass movement, because religion was the only space which was available for women in this period. Unlike in Buddhism, see, if women, which apply to men also, if you want to become a part of that religious group, you had to leave society. Dharmam Sharanam Gacchami, Buddham Sharanam Gacchami, Sangham Sharanam Gacchami. You have to be away from that and become part of that Sangha or Dharma. But here in Bhakti movement, you could continue to be in society, you could continue to work, you could continue to be married for women, you can carry on your duties, and yet you can worship God. So, it kind of gave a legitimate space of women. And, women could also define their actions and aspirations. They could participate in public gathering. They could also go on pilgrimages. They could also, compose their own songs. So much of creativity comes in at this time because now you are also directly connected to God. And therefore, this whole idea that women could have their own religious emancipation became very important at this time. And a number of women came up. Now, it is very interesting that when I compare the male bhaktas and the female bhaktas, the male bhaktas also, they were rejecting asceticism. They looked upon, liberation as being very important. They also were householders. And the dominant voice of the Bhakti movement and the general theme is of universalism is a general rejection of institutionalized religion. There is a central focus in all their writings on the inner devotion, concept of love. They are talking of a more egalitarian society, including their attitude towards lower caste devotees. But though, a large number of Shudras, a large number of women were both part of this movement, we find most of these voices are missing in historiography. The whole attitude of the Bhakti saints was that though they were clamoring for changes, though they were questioning a lot of hierarchies, they were questioning a lot of injustices, they spoke of an equal society, everybody being equal, but women were not part of this agenda. They could not really rise above this age-old prejudice of regarding women as a barrier to the path of salvation. According to the ancient tradition, it is both Kanak, Kamini are impediments to reach God. Kanak is, gold, possession. Kamini is women. So, they could not really rise above this prejudice, and they continue to look upon women as an impediment to bhakti. Now, most of these saints were living in a patriarchal society. They were holding patriarchal views, and they continue to hold that men are superior, women are subordinate. And they could not really rise above this view. They continue to look upon women, her status being defined by in terms of a role in the family vis-a-vis her husband. And a woman had no worth outside the institution of marriage. And through this institution of marriage, she has to serve her husband. Now, when I want to write an alternative history of these women bhaktas, and when I look at the methodology, how do I construct this history of these women? Because if we are to search for the historical figures of these women bhaktas, we hit a wall. There is very little information about them. As it is, most of our archives are about men, their activities, their deeds. We hardly have anything on women. And then, when you look at the Bhakti movement like the Bhakti movement, most of these women came from different classes. There is again very little information about them. But then what is very important is many of these women go beyond the shadowy realms of the past. And they are very much alive in our popular culture today. Day to day, if you look at the bhajans, if you listen to the songs, if you go to any 10th class textbook of any region, you will have the writings of some of these women. So, we cannot follow the traditional historical method in writing the history of these women. We have to turn to the collective memories and remembrance, which is based on their bhajans, which is based on their poems. And it is from here that we get a glimpse into the life of these women. Yes, there have been a lot of interpolation because it's an oral literature. It was only written down by 18th century. So a lot of interpolation came in, but still it gives you a lot of sense. So when you are recreating the history of this movement, you have to use feminist methodology, you have to go into anthropology, sociology, and also the historical method, and then you can reconstruct the history of these women. Now, whenever we look at all these women in the Bhakti movement, we always find that references to the women Bhaktas always speak of their childhood, marriage, and later spiritual retreat. These are like watersheds in their life, their childhood, their marriage, and then their attainment of Bhakti. In fact, this is something very much in keeping with the patriarchal norms which are assigned to women. And yet, many of these women had to struggle for acceptance within the large male dominated movement. And only through demonstration of their utter devotion to the divine, their outstanding poetry and stubborn insistence that, of their spiritual equality with their, contemporaries, that they were able to, get a little space in this movement, and they were acknowledged and accepted within the ranks. So again, this is something which can always be questioned. The whole struggle of these women, attest to the strength of the patriarchal values within any, religious or social movement, where, they are trying to prove their equality, and they are trying to, use very egalitarian means to access the divine. Now, I'll just pick up few saints. If you look at Akka Mahadevi, she is the daughter of a very rich merchant born in the village of Udutai in 12th century. She was a great devotee of Shiva. She grew into a very beautiful woman. And the chieftain of that land, whose name is Kaushika, he fell in love with her. And Kaushika was an unbeliever, but he forced Akka Mahadevi to marry him. And she was not interested, but so much of pressure was put on her father. Her father was also a well-to-do tradesman. And according to tradition, she agrees to marry him, saying with certain conditions. And one of them is that if he touches her against her will, she will, move out. She will leave him. And when he does that, this happens, she finally forsakes him, and she breaks all marital relations. And what is very interesting, in 12th century, she walks out naked, and goes searching for her Lord. And if you look at A.K. Ramanujam, he uses the word, she always refers to Shiva as Mallikarjuna. Lal Ded, again, she's in 14th century. Akka Mahadevi is 12th century. She lived in Kashmir. She is married at the age of 12, and she comes from a Brahmin family whose surname is Nika Bhatt of Pimpore. There are a number of legends which talk about her, that, she used to weave such beautiful silk, like a lotus top, and yet her mother-in-law treated her very badly. And finally, she's given the name of Padmavati. When she danced in frenzy, she lost her total, she became so frenzied in her dance that she came to be known as Lal Ded. And there are about 285 poems known as Vak, which are attributed to her. And finally, she also walks out of the house. She also walks out naked. Lal Ded, meaning, the lower portion, her belly becomes so expanded that it covers her private parts. Mirabai is one figure which everybody knows. She is the most well-known among the women. She is, end of 15th century, beginning of 16th century. All of us know that as a young child, Meera pestered her mother when she saw, Bharat going, that who is her bridegroom. And just to make her quiet, her mother picked up a statue of Krishna and said, he's your groom. And Meera started, thinking of Krishna as a groom. When she grows up, she is married into the Sushodhya family of Mewar. And she refuses to consummate her marriage, saying that she's already married to Krishna. There are various attempts at her life. They try to kill her because, it is said that she's brought disfame or dishonor to her family. Her in-laws worship mother goddesses, but she refuses to participate in that. And then, her husband constructs a small temple in the palace property, and she spends most of her time there. And finally, she also, leaves the house and starts moving towards Vrindavan and other places where Krishna lived. Sahjo Bai is again, she is born between 1683 and roughly her period of death is about 1765. And she is also, if you look at her life, she is also seen as being very hardworking. So continuously, she is grinding corn, carrying water, sweeping, digging. And she says, if you want to follow the Guru's path, you have to be very brave warrior. And only then you can deal out of, be out of the fear of death. All her verses are collected in Sahaj Prakash, which is the major text of the Chandradasi sect. You also have examples of Diwali Bai and Gaura Bai. They are again from Gujarat, and they have Diwali Bai is a Brahmin child widow from Deobhal. Her father was very poor, and therefore he left her in the charge of Saint Dadu Guru Bhagwan, and who was a great devotee of Ram, and he was the one who taught her the Ramayana. You also have Ganga Sati from Gujarat. She is another poem, and it is very interesting, because Ganga Sati is one woman who, passes on the oral tradition to her daughter-in-law. We do not have many examples like this in history, though, her whatever she is saying has been written down much later. She is a devoted Rajput woman, and she is married to Kaluba, who is in the village of Samdeala in Saurashtra. Now, Kaluba, according to Regent, he is also a great saint. And once what happened, a cow dies in that village. So many of the people come to him and they say that he is such a saint and he should, perform this miracle and bring back this dead cow to life. He does that. And then he realizes that, because every time his followers will come up and they will start asking him for miracles, and he didn't want to do that. And therefore, he decides to take Samadhi. Now, Ganga Sati also wants to join him by becoming a Sati, but he stops her and he says, no, I have passed all my knowledge to you, and you should pass all your knowledge to Panbai, who is their daughter-in-law. Ganga Sati is have said to have composed more than 40 bhajans, and you have a lot of these bhajans which are available. Another very interesting woman is Sant Toral, and she is a Kanti woman she is married to Sansatya. Now, Sansatya they are lower caste Rajputs. He had taken a vow that he is going to acquire three things in his life. And one is, he is going to take Tati, Toli, and Toral. Tati is a very famous sword, and Toli was the famous mare, and Toral is the saint woman. So what happens, one day when there is a satsang going on, he hides himself in the stable. And when, Sant Toral comes to distribute prasad, she finds that one scoop of it is left in her hand. So she calls him and finally he comes. And then, when her husband confronts him, he says, I have taken these vows. And very happily, the husband hands over Sant Toral to him. And according to legend, both of them travel, in a boat. There is a huge storm which is going and it is rocking the boat. And Jessel is so scared. He starts crying and he starts then, tell me about your life. And he starts narrating his life, what all sins he's committed, how he has killed people, he has molested women, and how he has killed, wedding processions. And finally, as he tells about his sins, the storm starts subsiding and the boat stops rocking. Janabai is another, from Maharashtra. She is, her period is roughly around 1298 to 1350. She is, her life is also very difficult. And Maharashtra women compose Abhang. They are known as Abhang. And Janabai is a maid servant, in the house of Gyaneshwar. So all her bhajans talk about her work, the washing, cleaning, cooking that she is doing, the daily grind of life, how she sweeps the floor, the courtyard, how she washes the vessels, and all that, because that is her worldview which she describes in her bhajan. Bahina Bai is the other important saint. She lived during 17th century, not 7th, and she is the only woman who is known to have written an autobiography. It has been translated into English by John Major in 1929. It has been published. Out of all these women saints, Bahina Bai is the only single woman who continues to be married. She does not abandon her house or leave out. But then, if you read her autobiography, it tells you what difficult life she had. She at 3 year old, she is married to Ratnakar Pathak, who is 30 years of age. Obviously, for her, it is a first marriage. For him, it's a second marriage. He is a priest and astrologer. And at the age of 7, Bahina Bai comes to Kolhapur to live with her husband. And she suffers a lot, because she is a child. But her husband is a grown up person and she starts following Tukaram. Now, Tukaram is a Shudra, and the husband gets very angry. He says, how can you make Tukaram as your guru? We are Brahmins. She, her whole autobiography. And I request you all to please read it. It is available on Amazon. And she talks so much about domestic violence. She talks about the difficulties in her life. She calls her husband Jamdagini. Her autobiography starts with, today I am 10 years old and I have not known a day of happiness. She talks about suicide so many times in her autobiography because she is troubled by her in laws, by her husband, and all that. And finally, all these women move out, and it is bhakti that gives them a space. I'll just read out some of the English translation. Mahadevi Akka says, I have Maya for mother in law, the world for father in law, 3 brother in law like tigers, and these husbands' thoughts are full of laughing women. No God, this man. Mind you, she's writing in 12th century. Then, we have all these concepts of Pati Parmeshwar, a woman has to be Sati, Savitri, and all that, She says, no God, this man. And I cannot cross the sister in law, but I will give this venture slip and go cuckold my husband with Hara, my lord. So she does not need, all these worldly relations. She will go to her. She talks about the constant conflict, husband inside, lover outside. I can't manage them both. This world and the other, I can't manage them both. Oh Lord, white as jasmine, I cannot hold in one hand. Meera says, I love this handsome one. He has no depth, decay, or form, no place or side, no end, nor birthmark. I love him. Oh, mother, listen. Sorry, this is again Akka Mahadevi. And imagine, in a very telling line, she says, take these husbands who decay and die and throw them into your kitchen fires. Her husband is God, who has no death, who has no decay or form. What? I don't need this mortal husband. Again, Lala may kill a big sheep or a tender lamb. Lala will have her lump or stone all right. I might scatter the southern clouds, drain the sea, or cure someone hopelessly ill. But to change the mind of a fool, issues that they have. Again, Meera says, friends, marriage of this world are false. They are wiped out of existence. Wed my indestructible one. The serpent death cannot devour. If you marry a mortal man, he will die. But if you marry God, he will remain forever. And all these women go against social norms. I constantly rise up, go to the God's temple and dance. Snapping my fingers, I don't follow the norm. As the oldest daughter-in-law, I have thrown away the veil. पद घुंघरू बांध मीरा नाची रे, लोग कहे, मीरा हुई बावरी, सास कहे कुल नासी रे. She's brought about defame to the family, but it doesn't matter. She wants to just go and against all the norms. Again, there is so much of a conflict in them between their bhakti and what society expects from these women. Oh, friend, I cannot live without the delight giver. Mother-in-law fights, my sister-in-law teases. The Rana remains angry. Everybody is angry with her. They have a watchman sitting at the door and a lock fastened to it. Why would I give up my first love, my only love? Meera's God is the lifter of mountains and nothing else pleases her. All of us know, Meera is a pan-Indian kind of figure. Everybody knows about Meera. How there are attempts at trying to kill her. I drank the cup of immortal bliss. My inebriation never goes away. A basket with a snake in it, and Meera put it around her neck, smiling. Meera hugged it as if it was a string of pearls. Rana took a cup of poison. Find Meera, he said, give it to her. And I drank it like chana milk. So all this strength they are getting from their bhakti. Bahina Bai writes in her autobiography, I was now 11 years of age, but I have had not a moment of joy. I had no independence. My wishes had no effect. I am very depressed in spirit. My daily life is full of troubles. So, what all these women go through is that after matrimony, they have a very restricted space. They cannot follow their they cannot follow their wishes, what they want to do, and they have no freedom. They have to follow the norms of the family. There are so many attempts at trying to kill them. They have to, ultimately, they have no other choice, except in the case of Bahina Bai, they have no other choice but to, leave their married home. Bahina Bai writes in her Abhang, she says, the Vedas cry aloud, the Puranas shout, no good comes to a woman. I was born with a woman's body. How am I to attain the truth? They are foolish, seductive, and deceptive. Any connection with the women is disastrous. Bahina says, if a woman's body is so harmful, how in the world will I reach the truth? See, everybody is looking down, saying, you have to be away from women, etc. And this is the question that she's raising. So finally, it is bhakti which provides this space, because the whole common thread that runs across the life of all these women is the restricted space of patriarchy for women. The treatment that is meted out to them in their in-laws' house, at the hands of their husbands, at the hands of their sister-in-law. And it is bhakti which gives them the space to move out of this restricted space and to move into the realm of the larger spiritual bhakti. And in this whole process of moving from that restricted space to the open space, they kind of, they get a lot of freedom. It is, they reject the whole power of the man to whom they are tied in subordinate relationship, and they go into their own self-assertion and alternative speaking. And in the process, they emerge as individuals. Because all these women are cultured into a certain culture, which is a very close culture. But now bhakti provides them this space. It gives them this courage to outpour the divine melodies of their heart, and which they articulate their whole concerns. They are singing in their own voices. And again, though many of these saints in medieval India had emerged in a atmosphere of discrimination, oppression, where patriarchy is ruling, they have the courage to chart their own courses. And in the process, they create this autonomous space where they are able to composing their own song. They are able to spread the message of bhakti and move out. And they compose these sacred hymns. See, because they are allowed to go on, they go on pilgrimages, they start walking, they move out alone, they have lot of support of the people, and this is something which these women get, and they feel that finally that They are wedded to God. They don't need these mortal men. If Sushotya is angry, what will he do to me? Meera says, I will sing the virtues of Govind, my friend. If Rana is angry, he will stay in his own country. If Hari is angry, I will wither away. I don't care for worldly position. She says, it doesn't matter. Let Rana be angry. What will happen? He will stay in his own country. My problem will be if Hari becomes angry with me, because then I will, decay. And one of the biggest notion for any women in any society is this whole concept of modesty. When these women openly, defy all notions of decency and modesty, there is nothing much you can do. Akka Mahadevi walks out naked, Lal Ded walks out naked, and she says, brother, you have come captivated by the beauty of these bellowing breasts, this brimming youth. I am no woman, brother, nor am I a whore. Again, Sant Janabai says, let me not be sad because I am born a woman. In this world, many saints suffer in this way. Cast off the shame and sell yourself in the marketplace. Then alone you can reach the God. If openly you go and sell yourself in the marketplace, what else is there? They are doing away with this whole notion of modesty. And there is so much of restlessness which you can see in their poems, whether it is Meera, whether it is Akka Mahadevi, Lal Ded, or any of these saints. Friends, the dark one glances is like a lover's dagger. It struck me and I grew restless. I lost all sense of my body. Pain spreads through my body. My mind is intoxicated. I have found few friends. All of them are mad. The chakor loves the moon. The moth by the lamp is burnt. The fish dies without water. Dear indeed is such love. How can I live without seeing him? My heart is not at rest. So the whole turmoil between their love for the God, the bhakti, they're, trying to adhere to social norms in society, it creates so much of restlessness. But they find answers. Akka Mahadevi says, for hunger, there is the village rice in the begging bowl. For thirst, there are tanks and streams and well. For sleep, temple ruins do well. For the company of the soul, I have you, Channa Mallikarjun. What more do I need? So, they find their own answers. And she says, that they rise above the body. You can confiscate money in hand. Can you confiscate the body's glory to this shameless girl? What is the need for cover and jewels? She herself calls herself a shameless girl. So she doesn't need any covering or any clothes as such. And she rises above the worldly status. Oh Shiva, when shall I crush you on my picture breast? Oh Lord, white as jasmine, when do I join you, stripped of body shame and my heart's modesty? And they do away, like I said, once you do cast away this whole notion of modesty, what is expected of women. Janabai says, cymbals in hand, a veena upon my shoulder, I go about. Who dares stop me? The pallo of my sari falls away, a scandal. Yet I will enter the crowded marketplace without a thought. Jani says, my lord, I have become a slut to reach your home. Openly, when you call yourself a slut, what more, insult can it be? But she says, I've become a slut just to reach you. So they don't just bother about these. Modesty is again something, which they throw away. People, male and female, blush when a cloth covering their shame comes loose. When the Lord of lives lives drowned without a face in the world, how can you be modest when all the world of the eye is the eye of the Lord, on looking everywhere? Where can you cover and conceal? She says the Lord is looking everywhere. What can you cover? So, they make a difference between the worldly this thing and what they are attempting at. And many of these women are beyond gender. They don't look upon themselves as women. There is a very interesting story about Meera. Bhaktamal Katha is, most of the writings of these saints have been put down in Bhaktamal Katha around 18th century. And when Meera starts, going around, she's wandering, she looks for Jeev Goswami is a very well-known saint of Krishna. He's staying in Vrindavan. And then, Meera goes and she wants to visit. When she reaches his ashram, she sends a word saying, I want to meet you. And Jeev Goswami sends a reply saying he has taken a vow that he's not going to see the face of a woman. And then Meera writes to him saying, I thought there is only one man in Vrindavan, but I am really surprised to see another man. And Jeev Goswami comes running. See, what is very interesting is even the male bhaktas, when they are writing Kabir or others, they imagine themselves as women. The god becomes the male and they become women. And yet, they had all these notions that you should not see a woman's face, etc. But these women are beyond all these distinctions. Gagavi says at one place, she says, one who grows breast and braid of hair is called a female. One who grows mustache and beard is called a male. If the knowledge in either male or female, oh Nastinatha, how do you decide that knowledge is male or female? Again, Akka Mahadevi says, suppose you cut a tall bamboo in two, make the bottom piece a woman and the head piece a man, rub them together and kindle. Now tell me the fire that is it male or female, O Ramnatha? See, they are beyond these distinctions of male or female. So when you look at the lives of all these women, what these women are doing, they are negotiating patriarchy and they are, trying to create an alternative space for themselves. And today also many of their writings are alive in folk memory. And like I said, if you look at the historical grounds, we will hit a wall. We do not have any information on them in our historical archives. And yet, you get a lot of information about these women, how they defy patriarchal norms, how they move out of domestic spaces into other spaces. And all of them walk out of marriage except Bahina Bai. And it is bhakti which gives these women the courage to defy these patriarchal orders. And the men's agenda does not include women, though the bhakti saints are also talking of equality. They are criticizing institutions, they are criticizing Brahmin priests, temples, etc. And yet this did not include women, because women to them continue to be seen in those familiar roles, as wife, mother, etc. And it was at this time that many of these saints came up and they started living very non-traditional, non-conformist life, talking of their own individual freedom. What is very important is these women led their life in their own terms. It is not, there was nothing like a liberation or something that they are going around. They didn't talk of a group. See, liberation, women's liberation and all are very modern concepts. But they were talking of their own individual freedom and how they wanted to live life in their own terms. And this is something which is very important. And we have to, if we integrate their voices into our whole mainstream history, it will really be a very small step in correcting the historical record. And it will give us a totally new perspective, because we keep saying, when we talk of women, that always they are, they have to be sativrata, prativrata. Women are always dominated by patriarchy. They don't have agency. We have all these kinds of writings which come up. And you always have, how in the Rig Vedic period, women had a very high status and how it started declining. But here are examples of these women who defied patriarchy, who had their own agency, who created their own space, and they wanted to live life in their own terms. Thank you. These are my books, Divine Sounds from the Heart, which is published in 2010, and a paperback edition came in 2020 from Cambridge Scholar Publishing. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Pandey, for delivering this lecture. It was truly an honor to listen to you and to enjoy this very interesting lecture. And as you summarize very briefly and very crisply in the last line, that we have to include these women saints in the mainstream history if we want to keep our historical records straight. So I think that is one thing that we all have to understand. And there are many questions from the audience, and we'll take those now.
Yeah, please.
This
But
question
I would
is
like
from,
to see them. I don't want to speak to a screen. So you can, they can show their video and I can talk to them directly.
actually
Is
the
it
questions
possible?
the questions are on the Facebook live chat.
Okay.
So maybe next time we can have them But this time I have to read them and you can
Okay.
answer those. This question is from Sukhdev Sohalji. His question is, how would you explain metaphorical usage of women in relation to God in the verses of male bhaktas?
See, one thing which I already explained was how, even though the male bhaktas are all talking about equality, they are against Brahmanism, against temple. But when they look upon God, they imagine themselves as women. God becomes a male and they are, pyari and all that of God. So they also imagine themselves as women. And most of the writings are in that way. But then again, there is a lot of difference if you look at Ram Bhakti, if you look at Krishna Bhakti, because it is right from 12th century to about 17th, 18th century. There is so much of literature and each one is defining by themselves. But you don't have the kind of voices which you have of the women, of the male bhaktas. But definitely, again, they look upon, some of them look upon God as Nirgun, some as Sagun, some, talk about how do you experience God. Surda says, you are asking me how is God. But if you give a deaf and dumb person jaggery to eat, how will he explain to you the taste? It is only through his eyes that you can feel. So similarly, God's experience is something like that which you can feel. So, they all define God in their own terms, in their own ways.
The next question is from Gurdas Dhaval, and his question is, male bhakts are still venerated. Is this the case for women bhaktas as well? Are there temples in the honor of these women saints?
There is a very interesting article in Manushi. And, I think in 1984, they brought out a special volume on women bhaktas. And there is a whole article on how Meera, nobody wanted to be like Meera in Rajasthan. They really, looked upon her as bringing insult to their culture and other things. So very rarely do you have, these kind. There are no temples or any such thing. But having said that, definitely, Indian culture has a lot of space. Though many of, how do we venerate a woman? One, if she is married, she has a son, she is like a pativrata. Those are the women who are highly valued. And yet, none of these women followed these norms. They were against all these. They were very different from them. And yet, they are venerated. We never burned these women, like what happened in European countries or others. They are still venerated. You always have their writings in a 10th class textbook, or they are very much part of our popular culture. So, yes, maybe not, they were not venerated to the as per the male saints, definitely that distinction made, and yet they are venerated. I wouldn't say that they are totally ignored.
Yeah. Uh, the next question is from Harshavardhan Elluri, and his question is, the women Bhakti saints basically appear to be social rebels. Many of them broke away from the traditional social life, and some of them appear to have rebelled against the patriarchy and oppression in upper section of traditional Hindu families. So, can you please throw some light on women saints as rebels?
Yeah, definitely. What you say is very correct, Harshvardhan. Yes, they were rebels. But what is interesting is because of the time period and all that, they were rebels they were not leading a social movement where, everybody follows, you try to change society. They saw certain problems and what they wanted. So in that sense, they wanted it only for themselves. But yes, they were rebels. They did rebel against the existing norms, against the existing practices to deal and do with what they wanted and what they felt, the little space that they wanted.
Yeah. The next question is from Sukhdev Swal again, and his question is, do we have psychological understanding of these female bhaktas apart from spiritual longings in the age of dominant modes of patriarchy?
See, when we talk of history, I don't think we go so much into psychology or others. And, but yes, if you read their writing, I'm sure if you read the autobiography of Bahina Bai, you will get so much insight into psychology. The turmoil she is going through, so many. Her husband would tie her hands, he would tie her to a bed, he would beat her. There is a very interesting story narrated in her autobiography. Her parents were also Pandit, and once, they got a dhan of a cow and a small calf. Now, the calf is a small, and Bahinabai is also a child, 11 years old, She started playing with this calf, and, she became so attached to it that she would sleep with it, she would get up with it, she would play with it. And once, in their town, again, the same Jeev Goswami had come and he was giving a lecture. So she also went to attend along with her calf, and she sat in that room. So everybody objected to it, and they said that, it is so stuffy and please leave this calf outside. She was forced to leave her calf outside. And according to the autobiography, the calf kept crying. There were tears in it, and inside Bahina was crying. So obviously, when this was reported to her husband, he felt very insulted that his wife is behaving in this manner. He beat her up a lot. He tied the calf. It was not given food for 2, 3 days, and the calf dies. So, the turmoil she's going through. She narrates all that, how she becomes very attached. So, yes, in some of their writings, when you look at, we can look at it from a psychological angle also. The whole restlessness, they want certain things. Society expects a certain thing. When they are roaming around, searching for God, they are not able to follow. You do get lot of insights into psychology. So one has to read in these lines and maybe give an analysis. I would look forward to a student doing that.
The next question is from Soumyadeep Mitra, and his question is, ma'am, can we say that one of the main cause for women to join the Bhakti movement was the persuasion of their in-laws?
Was the
Persuasion of in-laws, his or her in-laws.
No, I don't think any in-law would persuade the women to join. It was out of their own will. Maybe they were troubled. See, because look at the whole Indian social family structure. There is an expectation from a daughter-in-law how she should behave. And the more upper class, if you are in a royalty and all, like look at the case of Meera. When she's dancing with all these saints, etc., outside, Padagunguru Band, Meera Nachire. So she becomes a Kulnasini, she brings disfame to the family. So I don't think the in-laws would persuade, but yes, because of the kind of trouble, not meeting their expectation, many of these women walk out and go outside.
Uh, the next question is very long, so I'm just going to summarize it. Is there any concise biography of Mirabai, because she is one of the most famous women bhaktas that we know, that you said is very popular in India. So, do we have any concise biography of her?
Yeah, there are lots of books written on Meera. Biography as such, I'm not sure. But yes, we do have a lot of writings if you look at it in Rajasthan also. One of my student has done his PhD. He has also published a book on Mirabai. Karan from, he did his PhD. He looked at women saints in Rajasthan and Gujarat. So he's published his MPhil thesis as on Mirabai. And yes, you do have a lot of books which are written.
Uh, this question is from Devjani Day, and her question is, were women bhaktas successful in bringing a change in societal norms?
See, like I said, nothing, it's not like a social movement. They are not talking of liberation, equality. These were very modern concepts. They come much more, towards the end of 18th century, beginning of 19th century. So, one, it is very difficult to assess whether they could bring about a change. But yes, they brought about a change for themselves. They wanted a certain space and they were able to do it. See, half the time women are afraid, if you break norms, what will happen? What will others say? That doesn't give you the courage to move out. Here were a group of women from 12th century to 17th century who felt that this is what they wanted. And yes, it is space of religion because, that's the only space which is open, and they went ahead with it. So for themselves, they brought about a change. Maybe not so much for the society or others.
Yeah. The next question is from Valay Singh, and his question is, I would like to know about Banaras and its connection with Bhakti saints. While there are figures like Tulsidas, Ramanand, Kabir, and Ravidas, among others who are believed to be from the holy town, we don't hear of women bhakti saints from Banaras. Were there any bhakti saints, women bhakti saints from
Yeah,
Banaras?
see, I have a student now, Ravi, who's doing his MPhil. He'll be submitting soon. He's given me 3, 4 chapters. He looks at the whole Braj region and he has come up with some names and all. See, these are areas, again, like I said, one, we do not give importance to women's history because history is all about men's history. And second, a movement like the Bhakti movement, where they come from different classes, it is not even part of the mainstream historiography. So it is very difficult. But yes, you have a large number of women saints. We have to discover them, we have to find them. And some of my students are really working on this. I'm looking forward to Ravi's thesis being published. And yes, you do have women saints from all these regions which are very much part of the folklore of that region. But we need to bring them into mainstream historiography now. So
I
I'm
think
sure
we,
if you look every region, you will find. But it is the male bhaktas definitely who are more well known.
I think we all look forward to Ravi's book, and I think that is going to be one of the most groundbreaking researches. The next question is by Arjun Abhishek Roy's question is, do you think spirituality as a whole for both men and women, an escape to leave the societal norms who actually found it difficult to adjust within the convention, exploitation, and cynicism of the society they lived in, and tried to build a world of their own? And I think you have answered that
Yeah,
earlier.
definitely. Definitely it is there, and it's a very good question because yes, they were trying to escape and all, but for the men, it was not that difficult. See, Tukaram's wife was also very nagging. She did not like his bhakti. She was after him saying that don't spend so much time, but still he could deal with his wife and continue with his bhakti. But if a women wanted to do, it was not the same. Like Meera, they tried to kill her. They sent her poison. They sent her a snake and all that. So for women, it was not possible. There were a lot of issues. For the men, they could continue though with all these difficulties. But for the women, it was much more difficult. So they had to leave the family life, leave their husbands, and then walk out and only follow bhakti. That was the difference which is there between men and women. So yes, through spirituality, they are both trying to create an alternative space.
We'll have one last question for the evening from Bindu Amat, and her question is, how would you compare the Buddhist Harigatha with the Bhakti poems, women Bhakti poems?
Yeah, see, Therigatha is also very interesting. If you look at some of them, the women, we don't have names of those women. And some of them are writing very interesting, poems. If you read them, they are also questioning some of these norms of society. In the Bhakti poetry, at least we know some of the names which are attributed to it. So I could see a lot of similarities in what is being written because they are all questioning the dominant order in some way or the other. Fine.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for answering these questions and for delivering this lecture. It was truly an honor to, have you on Carvan to deliver this such an amazing lecture. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Okay, thanks a lot. Good. Keep up the good work. And once again, I'm so glad that you have come back to work and all the best.
Thank you
Ishan,
so
all
much,
the
ma'am.
best for Karaman. Okay.
And thank you so much, everybody who joined us live this evening. The video will be available on our YouTube channel, so don't forget to hit the subscribe button. We'll be back again with another lecture by Professor Andre Vink on 18th May, that is day after tomorrow, on the rise of Islam in the Indus borderland at 5 p.m. Don't forget to watch that on our Carvan Facebook page. Thank you and have a great evening.
Okay. Thank you.